Want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank CUPA for starting this day with patient advocate stories. The mission of this organization has always been patient forward, and that is deeply appreciated by all of us on that side of the story. You're going to hear from two incredible human beings this morning who are going to give you a very personal and up close view of what this looks like when you are catapulted into a medical emergency. You don't have the language, you don't know what expanded access is, you don't know what an IRB is, you don't know what a sponsor is, and it is really a life or death moment in your life or in the life of the person you love the most. I would encourage all of you to please go to the Isaac Foundation and get more information about the people you're going to be hearing from this morning. And please drop your questions in the chat. We would love to hear from you. This is a conversation, and we are really eager to hear what you want to know. So I'm going to start with you, Anne. Anne, you have a very unique story. You're both caregivers, but I want to ask you how you were thrust into this world and how you came to learn the phrase expanded access.
Hi, Mary Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. We are a French family. We are based in Sweden, in Europe, and our son was diagnosed at the age of 8 in 2018 with a diffuse midline glioma, which is a brain tumor, which is inoperable and without cure. So the prognosis was really poor, with a median survival of more or less 1 year from diagnosis.
So, facing that, what did you say when you heard that? And when did you learn that maybe there could be other options outside of what you had been told, Anne?
Well, first you're totally in shock. So you just, follow what the doctors say to you. And for us, it was 1 month of proton therapy, followed by 4 months of chemotherapy. Um, I mean, you are in shock as a parent, as a caregiver, and you are no doctor. You don't know what to do. So really, it's all about trusting the medical team who takes care of your child. But for us, beginning of January 2019, unfortunately, the tumor was still growing. At that time, it was about the size of a lemon in the head of a child, so it was quite big. And we were told that nothing can be done for our son but palliative care. So of course, this kind of information is a shock. You don't know what to do, but we were spending time seeking information, reading articles on the internet and also scientific publications. Um, and among all the websites that we visited, we found the Musella Foundation for Brain Tumor Research and Cancer Commons, and there are like databases with a lot of information. They gather a lot of expert knowledge to inform and advise people like us. And that's how we learn about a new drug that could help our son. So the idea was to actually find this drug, which was the only promising option we had. But the problem was it was only available through clinical trials in the United States. So for us, it was like a double punishment. So we had to gather all the information, all the medical files, the images, the reports. We had to translate all this into English. We had to contact the sites that could offer a clinical trial in the US. And for each center, we had to redo the process all over again, make contact, send information, upload all the documents, uh, and complete also questionnaires, specific questionnaires for each of them. So it was a lot of work, and that's the time that you would like to spend with your child. So it's really complicated, but you have no other option, so you do it. And out of the 4 sites that we contacted, only one was able to invite us to see if my son was eligible. And so we went there. We just, left everything. My husband had a very understanding employer, so he could quit his job for a while. We traveled to the US without any idea of how long that would take. And money-wise, we started fundraising so that we could pay the financial guarantee that was asked by the centers, since we were non-Americans. And unfortunately, when we arrived in this site after an MRI, our son was denied because the tumor was too big and he was too weak. So then again, you're lost. You're just in despair. You don't know what to do. You don't know what's next. So we reached out for the American associations we were already in touch with, and that's the first time that we heard about the extended access, and that's them on our behalf who took all the necessary steps to ask the pharma company for it, and to eventually have my son accepted in one site in Washington, D.C. Again, we had to pay another deposit, so it was again a question of money also. And my son could start the extended access in April the 4th, 2019. We had, after 1 month, we stayed in the US. After 1 month, we went back to Europe, and the plan was to come every 2 months to have all the checks done and to get the medication. So the next visit was not so concluent. We didn't know what to do. It was hard to see, too soon to say. So our oncologist decided to carry on the drug. And that's on the next visit that we were able to have this incredible news that the tumor was regressing. So you can imagine the relief at that point. So then until March 2020, we were doing the journey every 2 months from Europe to the US to get the drug. And with the pandemic, we were again facing the unknown, as we didn't know if we were able to travel or if we had to stop everything. But the pharma company was willing to send us the drug every 2 to 3 months through a huge solidarity chain between the hospital and us. And our medical team here in Europe has been doing the MRIs and all the checkups since then. And so everyone collaborates so that Anatole keeps taking his treatments. And as for now, the tumor has reduced by 80%. So my son is alive and kicking. Of course, he has impairments and some difficulties, but still, he is with us.
And
so,
oh,
yeah.
no, please finish your thought.
Really, extended access saved our son's life. We are more than 3 years now post-diagnosis. Anatole shouldn't be longer with us, given the type of cancer he has, and according to the statistics and the doctor's opinion.
And your story is so illustrative of so many different aspects of this process. The trust, the initial trust in a diagnosis, the frustration of getting information, particularly on an international scale. This illnesses know no borders, right? But then also, I think when we talk to Sukhun, we're going to hear a different side of the story, which is the difference between opportunities and outcomes. And I think what all of us as patients, and particularly as caregivers, when we've walked in those shoes, what we're asking for is just a chance. We want just the chance to find the best possible treatments, and that is a difficult thing for us to navigate. Doing it in a space in our lives that is extremely emotional, where our cognition is deeply compromised, and where we are also caring for someone who is very sick, or we ourselves are very sick. So Kun, I want to hear your story, because it is very different, but I think it also says a lot about what the potential of this process is.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, and I'm hearing your story second time, but it's really a great story. My wife was diagnosed of triple negative breast cancer in the year 2017 and unfortunately passed away in 2020. But she was able to get expanded access to the unapproved drugs twice during her clinical journey. And there were several challenges as families with no medical background, as well as being located in Korea. So the thing with her cancer was that no drugs seemed to work. We were failing on each drug very quickly, and we ran out of option in about 6 months. So she was very sort of she had the physique and the condition that could go through the treatment, but there was just no other option. And because she already had 3 sets of chemotherapy, the clinical trials were usually, we were usually ineligible because usually the clinical trials were accepting patients without treatment history. So we didn't know what to do, and she was willing to do anything, and I was willing to help her get the best treatment option. And so I started sort of studying triple negative breast cancer, and there seemed to be a lot of promising drugs. I mean, at least it looked promising at that time in phase 2 and phase 3. And some were actually, on the verge of FDA approval, but being located in Korea, those drugs are going to take a long time to get to Korea because we have national health insurance, and that means the pharma companies have to sort of negotiate the price with the government, and because companies don't want to do that in the first year of the launch, it usually takes about 1 or 2 years to get to Korea. So what I did was, I reached out to all the pharma. I've emailed probably, more than 30, 40 companies repeatedly until I get a reply. And once I get some replies, I sent them the medical record of my wife, and some were very kind, and that seems like she would be eligible for expanded access, and that means I would save my physician's time, right? Our physician's time for looking after drug or getting approval from the pharma company. So it was basically, me doing homework before we see a physician. And, the first expanded access my wife had, that drug is actually FDA approved now. And she actually had a very short living response, but at least it was the first drug actually that was able to sort of hold off my wife's cancer. The other 3 drugs, her cancer kept progressing, but this drug was able to sort of, I think in retrospect, it gave us probably, 1 or 2 more months. So maybe some people could say, that efforts for 2 months, but I think it was totally worth it. And my son is now 8. Our son is now 7 years old, and he was about 5 or 6 back then. And we were able to travel, during her, the break from the chemo, and unfortunately the second expanded access didn't work out, but she was already very ailing, and but some companies were very helpful, while it did take a lot of efforts from my side and our family's side.
Yeah, and I just want to say, we all work in a space of really difficult and challenging bioethical questions and conundrums. But when you are looking at 1 or 2 more months of your child's life, 1 or 2 more months of your child having his mother, it's incalculable. And that is one of the things I want everyone listening and watching today to be thinking about. When we look at statistics and data and numbers and outcomes, we are also talking about time, and we are talking about time with the people we love, and we all just want more of that. We have in our audience today people who are from the biomedical field, but also from the patient field. I want to speak first to people who are coming to us from the field of pharma and from the medical profession, because so many of them don't know what the options are. So many people working, we think that our healthcare providers know everything. They don't. What do both of you, let me start with Anne, what do you wish that those doctors you had first spoken to had known that might have saved you a little bit of time and effort and grief?
I guess it's really a question of giving an option, as you say. Giving an option is also giving hope. So it's really important to understand that when you say to someone that there is no other option but palliative care, it's just like it's unacceptable, because we are on an emotional level not willing to accept the death of someone we love. So it's about having this understanding and make sure that you know at least that there is the possibility to have options through clinical trials and expanded access, because it's also the choice of the caregiver and the parent then to look at it and to ask themselves if they want to go for it. And I'm pretty sure that the answer will be yes most of the time. But it's something that I definitely missed, because it was just a closed door.
Right. And that is a conversation that as patients and parents and caregivers does not necessarily have to end with the first person you speak to. But that is hard, and that's very hard when you're vulnerable and the person you love is vulnerable and you need care. Sakun, I want to ask you now from the patient and caregiver perspective, what did you wish you had known at the time? Because it's hard and it's daunting, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think I sort of wish that sort of all the patients and the caregivers would be informed about the options of expanded access when they become diagnosed, because through the time, I met a lot of caregivers and a lot of patients as well, and a lot of physicians as well. And every person is different, right? Some people were afraid of entering clinical trials because it's unapproved. But some patients were very eager to sort of try novel drugs. So given that there's a vast amount of heterogeneity among the patients and even the physicians, some physicians were very sort of active in giving and providing advices and where to look. Some physicians were just like, oh, you don't have any option, and that's it. And some are very cold, right? So we had a lot of different experiences on our each of our clinical journey. So I wish there was a sort of ground level sort of information that all the patients and the caregivers can get at the first of the diagnosis. I think we don't want to we don't want to get too high of the hopes, but at least we can be rational and we can think about what's gonna come next,
Yeah,
especially for those drug diseases without that many options.
I want to ask both of you. Please feel free to take turns. But this is such a on one end of the spectrum, it's there's no options, the door is closed, and on the other, we get a lot of misguided information and a lot of misinformation out there, and there is, I think, often a sense that there are hidden the doctors don't want you to know, and there are cures out there and the doctors don't want you to be cured, and that if I could just have access to this treatment, if I could just get my hands on that treatment, everything would be better. How do you advise people, doctors, physicians, pharmaceutical reps, researchers, patients, to manage those expectations and understand that getting access or going down a particular path may be a process of trial and error, and it may involve more disappointment and failure?
I would say the options needs to be reasonable and realistic, and that's something that needs to be discussed. And discussion, take the time to discuss with the patient or the caregiver is the key, I really think. As long as you can discuss the data based on all the studies of the potential benefit of a treatment, And if they are not available, to be assured that there is a complete follow-up from the team to minimize the risks, then you would have all the keys in your hands to open that door. So it's all about trust with whom you are working with, because the doctors are not no, I'm not convinced at all that they hide things from the patients, but sometimes they think patients or caregivers won't understand, or they will mix it up or whatever. We can understand if we are given the right information for that.
That is so, so, so important. There was a really interesting study out of Beth Israel here in New York City recently about sharing notes, doctors sharing notes with their patients. And there was a lot of pushback against that and sense that patients won't understand and they don't want to. And actually, patients did really well, and they reported much better communication with their doctors and much better outcomes. Information is powerful for all of us. So, Kun, how did you remain in dialogue with your wife during periods where she was, I'm sure, very emotionally exhausted, physically weakened? How did you advocate for her wishes against maybe competing information and different advice from her physicians?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. There were a time, she sort of wanted to give up the treatment because it just kept failing. So, and like even the chemotherapy, the patients have to sort of be careful with what she does and what they do at times, right? Because immune their immune system is suppressed during the chemotherapy. So their quality of life had to be sacrificed. And given such sort of past failures, is it worth trying one more time the novel drug? And I was sort of the wanted always wanted to give her some energy and the hopes of being a positive guy that I am. I had to sort of, if I almost sort of had to sort of, um, yeah, I mean, I had to believe in myself, right? I had to believe that this was gonna work. If I didn't believe that, why would I want her to try this new drug? So I think I kept telling myself, I'm gonna look for more information, and I'm gonna email more pharma. I'm gonna talk to more physicians, and and it was not always the case. They were out could always find the best option. It had to be something feasible that's available at the time that we can try, right? It couldn't be the best option in the entire world, but I kept telling her, we have to sort of think about the hopes and the hopeful outcome rather than thinking on the downside. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to ask you, I want to ask both of you, but I'm going to start with you, Anne. You know, we are deluged with information. It is overwhelming and confusing. Was there one thing that stands out in your mind? And I want to ask this of you, Sukhun, too, so prepare yourself. Was there one thing that someone said to you in the course of this, whether for good or bad, that stands out to you as a turning point moment? Something that someone said that really clicked in your
I
mind?
I think it was on a group on Facebook because, of course, you reach out for information where it is, and it's typically yeah, on the internet, and Facebook groups of parents are really, really active. And I think one of the first thing that really, um, wake me up from all the vertigo of being stuck was your child is not a statistic. And of course, there are options. And when you, and again, that's my motto, when there are options, there is hope. So when you have hope, I'm not saying that everybody can be saved with hope, but at least, you can act. And I'm really confident that acting is the first step to change things for every patient is unique, every tumor is unique. So it's and trusting yourself in doing something positive.
I think that's great. Sukhun, do you have something that really jumped out at you?
I mean, I think just as Anne said, I think the peers, the caregiver, sort of the group chat, or the WhatsApp equivalent in Korea, we shared a lot of information. Of course, there was bad information as well, but we had to sort of filter them. But I think without them, I think it was sort of impossible to, because there were something about caregivers that we sort of felt our pains and emotions we were which we couldn't share with anyone else, so I think that was very helpful. And being around other patients was helpful to me as well, because the way they cope with their situations, sort of we were able to reference it. And but after all, it was sort of family who got me through this, I guess.
Yeah, that peer-to-peer support, that community. I will say here in the US, we are a very bootstraps-oriented culture, and I think globally, we are very sickness and death averse, and it is hard to have those larger conversations. A lot of times, you can feel very isolated in illness and in the experience of caregiving and an illness, and to find people who you have that common language with is really crucial. It is not extraneous. It is really crucial to getting through it emotionally and physically. We had a question from Lena about costs. Not that you can solve that issue, but I would like to ask you how intimidating it is to be thinking about coming into a healthcare system, particularly when it is one that is unfamiliar with you, about how were you going to approach this? How are you going to logically navigate something that is so complex and overwhelming and intimidating? I'm going to start with you, Suklum, because you've been going second all the time. How was it for you looking at this system and thinking, all right, how are we going to do this?
I mean, in terms of like drug price, I mean, Korea, a lot of the chemotherapies and the standard cares are covered by the national health insurance system. So it was not very much of the pressure for us. In even the expanded access, they were all paid by pharma. But the thing about the national health insurance system is that we don't have a lot of novel drugs that are coming in as soon as they're FDA approved in the United States. So for those drugs, I mean, if we were to actually able to buy them or purchase them, I think it would cost us a lot of money, and I think it's almost sort of impossible. So I guess downside of the national health insurance system, I guess, is the upside is that everybody gets a really cheap standard care, but for the novel drugs, it takes time. So I think that's the sort of double-edged sword, but it's usually good for the people. So I think we like it here.
And
Yeah, well, it's the same here in Sweden. Like, medication is quite free. But in our case, as soon as we learned that the treatment was only available in the US, the question of the money just came very quickly. And I must really thank one of my closest friends who actually told us, you have to make this fundraising right now so that money will never be a break or a problem for you if you want to go to the US, if that's really what you want to do. And so we actually made the fundraising before we knew we had to travel to the US. And that was the best thing ever, because at least as soon as we knew we could go to have Anatole check, then we were able to travel. All our expenses were, covered, but also the tremendous high expensive costs of the medical system in the US when you are non-American. It was just so crazy, and hopefully we had this fundraising with us.
And I just want to point out for everyone who is joining us that if you look in the chat, you can learn more about Anatol's story. There is a link to the GoFundMe where you can get a little more context for all of that. Both of you are parents. I'm really curious because we don't talk about that. We don't know about these kinds of options. How are you both now raising your sons to understand a little bit about what might happen when you get sick and what your options might be and how to talk to doctors? Have you had those conversations with your young children about how do you advocate for yourself as a patient?
Well, I think Anatole understands that a doctor knows a lot, but we can talk with them and we can come with ideas and suggestions. We are no doctors, so they will have eventually, the right position or the right vision of the thing. But at least you always can discuss. You can always say no if you don't agree with what is said also. And I think it's really something that changed for me and my family around and my friends as well.
Yeah, so for me, so I'm doing a PhD and on the business school, and I'm do a lot of research around expanded access, how pharma companies use expanded access, which will be part of my dissertation. And I tell my son, like, we have all the scientists and great innovative companies trying everything they can to come up with a drug that cures a lot of difficult diseases, but trying doesn't mean that it solves all the problems. There's a lot of diseases that still requires a lot of research and a lot of innovation and a lot more maybe research and development further down the road. So I tell my son that there's a whole lot of things you can do when you grow up, and there's a you can become a scientist, you can be an inventor, or you can be anything that can sort of help the other side of the table, and we hopefully we can be sort of small incremental help to the community of sort of patients and caregivers.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a collaboration, right? When someone comes to you, I'm sure you both have a lot of people now coming to you when you are known in your circle as that person who has been through that thing, and someone reaches out to you and says, "I just got this diagnosis," or "My husband, my wife, my father just got this diagnosis." And what do you tell them is the first thing they should do?
The first thing again is discuss. Discuss with your nurses, discuss with your doctor, discuss with your oncologist, discuss with other patients, discuss with families. So that the information just circulates, and maybe out of it there will be someone who say, "Well, wait, for this special case I know there is maybe an option, maybe another way of doing." And that's how I try to get the thing rolling. We are contacted by a lot of families, and obviously when you have to tell them, well, there is a treatment but it's in the US only, it's very hard. So it's always, I'm always telling them, you have to discuss with your oncologist first, see if that's really the tumor that can be taken into account with this kind of treatment, and then see what's next. But I'm not, taking the place of the medical team, of course, and I'm just trying to be a supportive caregiver, not only for my child, but also for their child too.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I learned that in each patient is different. I think I mentioned this prior conversation. So like depending on the personality and sort of environment they grew up, some people were more eager to sort of try new options, whereas some people were sort of really wanted to delegate everything to their physicians and sort of go along with it. So I tell when the caregivers come to me, I tell them, figure out what your patients want and try to meet the physician that understands what physician wants, because some patients had a lot of, it was not always easy to communicate with the physician, and there were definitely some sort of level of fit between the patient and the physician too. So try to understand what your patient wants, and if you find a physician that can sort of understand where the patient is coming from, I think that will make things easier for you.
I think that's really huge. It's about understanding there is no one size fits all, and really tailoring the experience to the patient, and then secondarily to the caregiver, because the caregiver has to be able to function as well. Sakun, I have another question for you from Dennis. Dennis wants to know, what do you think the most important incentive for companies is to doing more expanded access from your insights and experiences so far? I also want to point out we've got about 5 more minutes. So if anyone has any other questions, hit us now. We would love to talk to you.
Yeah, if that's Dennis from by tomorrow, I think he knows much better than me. But well, I'm trying to figure out whether there are the competitive incentives when doing expanded access, where a pharma could become risk averse in giving out expanded access, because usually the patients at this stage are likely to fail with any treatment, no matter how novel or how good the drug is, because they have tried all the options. Their remaining time may be short, and they may be weak for a whole bunch of reasons. It might be risky for them to sort of give them the drug. So I think what maybe the regulatory perspective is, if there shouldn't be any penalty in terms of sort of FDA approval process, if expanded access somehow, adds to the not a good results, bad results. So I think if pharma can sort of, don't think about that risk of, getting failed expanded access, I think it might help them, or maybe it might sort of improve their incentives in terms of, you are more patient pro, caregiver pro. You are giving this drug with the consensus of the physician and the patient, and if even if it doesn't work out, it's not going to jeopardize your marketing approval process. With I'm not an expert in pharmaceutical products, but from the sort of company perspective, I think that could be one.
Yeah, I want to ask you both one more question, which is a little bit of a big one. But you both talk about just how daunting it is. And what would have made it easier? Was there one thing that would have made it easier?
um, I think I will take the my other motto is to talk about my three H's, which is healthcare, help, and hope. And to me, it's really important that to note, to see that healthcare support is necessary. It is crucial for the medical staff to reach out to caregivers and families in order to explain what expanded access is, because they usually don't have a clue, and to give all the accurate information about options through that access. And it's also talking about healthcare, but it's also the pharma industry that must make things clear. That's also all the legal institutions internationally, not only for the US or for Europe. Um, and then help, caregivers, they need help from the associations and the virtual databases that you can find on the net, and all the virtual groups of discussion, to have more information and to be aware of what can be done. But also from the medical teams, because once you take the decision to go for an expanded access, you may also feel the fear. It's not an approved medication. you don't know about the side effects of this drug. And sometimes the feeling I had was that maybe I was doing something illegal. And then hope, you know, you need to have option, you need to have hope in that journey. And definitely expanded access give that hope. So it's essential to work on how information can circulate between the multiple counterparts so that this expanded access can be guaranteed to every patient, no matter what his geographic, economic, or social situation is.
Yeah, I want to ask one more question because our time is almost up. But we got a question from the audience about both of you. Were you given expanded access while the trial was ongoing and other people were on the placebo? This is an ethical question that has come up a lot in the past year with another sort of well-known case. I'm curious if you know the answer to that and how you felt about the ethics of that kind of treatment.
I mean, some the people who are on the placebo might argue that it's unethical, and I totally understand their perspective. But at the same time, I think what the problem here is how to assess whether a patient is ineligible for any other options. That was not objective at all. Sometimes you have sort of standard cares, and how do you assess every clinical trial that's going on in your country, whether you are eligible or not? And I think it were dependent a lot on the physician's assessment. And sometimes it didn't sound very objective, but as long as we sort of agreed, we were had to sort of follow his words. In our case, it was him, and he were sometimes adamant that there's one clinical trial that you are actually technically eligible, so the company might say no, etc. So I think it really depends on the assessment of the eligibility of other treatment options.
Yeah. So I have to let us all go now. I could talk to everybody all day long. In fact, I wish I could. I just want to point out that we had a comment from Kevin who said it would be beneficial to hear from regulators online to explain the reasoning behind expanded access being only last ditch efforts, which is a great point, Kevin. Since there are so many times data from P2 or P3 trials show promise in subsets that are early in the disease, why limit expanded access to only those who don't qualify for trials? I hope that we can continue having that conversation in some of the breakouts throughout the day and some of the other conversations that go on. We have to go, but if you go to the Isaac Foundation, we are all, you can find us and our bios there. I will speak for myself and say I'm happy to talk to anyone who is on this conversation right now who would like to continue the conversation and have any further questions. I imagine that Anne and Sukhun are also open to hearing from you within their limits, of course. But I want to thank you both for joining us today. I want to thank everyone for participating in this conversation. It takes a great deal of humanity and vulnerability to share these intimate stories that are painful and emotional and intellectually challenging. And you have done such a tremendous service to the patients, to the advocates, and to the people in the healthcare profession today. I want to thank you both so much. And I want to thank CUPA for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.